Well, we're in the final countdown with just days to go before the first voting takes place for the 2020 election. The Iowa caucuses are Monday, and Democratic presidential hopefuls are trying to make every second count. Senator Elizabeth Warren made it to a campaign event Friday night, hours after attending President Trump's impeachment trial in Washington. The latest poll from Monmouth University shows former Vice President Joe Biden with a slight edge over Senator Bernie Sanders among likely caucus goers. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe reports from Coralville, Iowa.
With Monday's caucus looming, Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg crammed in 7 events between them on Friday.
Every 4 years, everything begins here in Iowa.
Go in on Monday evening and caucus for us.
By late in the evening, the 4 senators running for president were making plans to head back out on the trail.
Senator, will you be back here for Monday closing arguments?
State of Iowa. State of Iowa.
In Iowa, Biden and Buttigieg have had an in-person edge.
Who among us is most likely to be able to defeat Donald Trump?
While the senators have been forced to campaign from a distance.
I'm here. I'm hoping that the people see it as a plus.
And to pay for ad time to make a final pitch.
But I'm switching parties to caucus for Elizabeth Warren in 2020.
Together, we will transform this country.
The ads are about unity, but there's also some infighting.
I've seen Vice President Biden making the case that we cannot afford to take a risk on somebody new right now. I believe at a time like this, the risk we cannot afford to take is to turn to the same Washington mindset that has brought us to this point.
The man not competing in Iowa, former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg, is also making his case on the air. Campaign spending reports show Bloomberg has already spent more than $140 million on TV and internet advertising nationwide.
I want to bring in our CBSN political reporter, Caitlin Huey-Burns from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. All right, Caitlin, the Iowa caucus can be so confusing, this entire process. Remind us how it'll all work on Monday.
Yeah. It is confusing, and we've been studying for it ahead of the caucus on Monday. It's not like a primary where you're going in and checking off a name on the ballot. Instead, it's like a meeting. Everybody meets at 7 p.m. Central Time. There are over 1,600 precincts here in Iowa, and at times it can feel kind of like a high school dance or a gym event. You gather in church basements or high school gymnasiums or big auditoriums, and you basically find your group. You have a chance to find a candidate that you like. And so if you're supporting candidate A, you go into this corner, candidate B, C, you kind of group along with those candidates. Whoever gets 15% of the people in the room, those candidates stay viable. So if your candidate does not get 15% of the support in the room, then you have a chance to choose a second candidate and go along with them. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of jockeying going around. And that's where persuasion really matters here. A couple of different things to point out. The candidates and the campaigns are really hoping to be voters' second choices, which means that if your candidate isn't viable, they want you to come over to their side. The other thing to keep in mind is the power of seeing your friends, your families, your neighbor in this room and being kind of persuaded by their choice. So you can kind of look around and see who people are supporting and maybe go with that candidate. So a lot of jockeying, a lot of politics involved, and that's why the ground organization from these candidates really matters, and it really helps to get our ardent supporters out on a cold night to be there for about an hour, to be there and caucus for you.
Yeah, you know, when you talk about the ground game being so important, who are the candidates that you're watching come Monday?
Well, Amy Klobuchar has to have a good showing in Iowa, especially since she's been campaigning here as the senator from next door, from Minnesota. She has been talking about how she's able to win in the Midwest. If she isn't able to do well here in Iowa, it's difficult for her to make a case to continue. And the reason I'm watching her is to see how impeachment and her having been in Washington all week, how that might affect her standing here, not being able to have the same kind of face time with voters that she wanted to have. We're also here in Cedar Rapids at an event for Elizabeth Warren. You can see the line behind me here lining up to see her. She flew into Iowa last night after the impeachment proceedings for yesterday wrapped up. She hopped on a plane, was in Des Moines talking to supporters. She's going to have a few events here in the eastern part of the state. We've seen her slide in polling over the past couple of weeks after she did really well in the summer in polling. So she's really looking to her ground organization to be able to do well in Iowa and get that ticket to New Hampshire.
Voters in Iowa are notorious for waiting until the last minute to make up their mind. A CBS News Battleground Tracker poll this week shows that Senator Bernie Sanders actually has the most committed supporters, followed by Warren, then Buttigieg, then Biden. So you've spoken to the voters there. Does this dovetail with what you're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, a lot of voters still undecided, and they're waiting, some of them, to make that final decision when they get into the room. And so that's why you're seeing these candidates try to be everywhere, all over the state, or at least have surrogates over the state for them to get people to help make up their mind. I've been in Iowa over the past several months. I remember being here in January of last year following the candidates. So we've talked to a lot of voters here over the past year, and we've seen voters start to whittle down their decisions. It's funny running into some voters that you've seen at past events start to say, well, I'm down to 3 or 2 candidates. So Monday is decision time, and a lot of people are going to be kind of looking at the polling. Another big poll comes out tonight, looking at the final arguments by the campaigns to make their decision. But a lot of Iowans still undecided, and that's what's fueling a lot of the underdog campaigns here.
We mentioned that Senator Elizabeth Warren just made it to a campaign event Friday night after leaving President Trump's impeachment trial. How is impeachment affecting these candidates who are senators who really haven't been able to spend the time in Iowa that they want?
That's right. They've been having to spend that time in Washington sitting through those impeachment proceedings, while candidates who don't have a day job in Washington, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, have been all over the state meeting lots and lots of voters. So it really will remains to be seen whether this does in fact have an impact on how voters decide on Monday. But this is why the candidates have had lots of surrogates here. We were at an event last night for Bernie Sanders where he had lots of surrogates, including his wife. He video conferenced in to talk to supporters there and try to get them excited. He also hopped on a plane last night and made it to Iowa. He'll have events today. But this is something we really have never seen before. These candidates being sidelined and trying to make up the ground over the weekend. So that means we'll be really busy covering all these candidates around as they make their final pitches.
And finally, we learned yesterday the DNC has dropped the donor requirement for the February debate. So that actually means that Michael Bloomberg may actually be able to qualify for the first time. How are candidates responding to this?
Well, a couple of candidates are pretty upset, especially candidates who had to drop out of the race after not being able to make that debate stage. Lots of people have used Bloomberg as a punching bag on the trail because billionaires are not too popular in the Democratic Party right now. So this has a lot of campaigns irked because trying to get those grassroots donors costs a lot of money, costs a lot of time and resources to cultivate that support. And so they have been very critical of the DNC in the process so far, and this makes them even more so. But there's also candidates who have been really highlighting the donors that they've been getting. Elizabeth Warren announced today that she reached her 1 millionth donor.
Very fascinating. I want to thank you so much. Caitlin Huey-Burns coming to us from Iowa.